With sports car racing news and analysis from around the globe, this is the Double Stint Podcast. Here's John DeGeese and Ryan Marine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Double Stint, Sports Car 365 sports car racing podcast in Indianapolis. I'm Ryan Marine. John DeGeese joins me from Chicago. We've got racing from this past weekend to recap, highlighted by SRO America in action at Sebring. Plenty of news to touch on this week, some listener questions that have come in, and a chance to look ahead at what is to come this upcoming weekend in sports car racing as well. We'll start in Sebring, though, with SRO America, and most notably Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, where we saw a bunch of championships get wrapped up basically around early, John, especially in GT World Challenge, where all three class championships have already been settled. Jordan Pepper and Andrea Caldarelli continuing their dominant season, sweeping the races, claiming the championship, not just for themselves, but also the teams and manufacturers championships to K-Pax Racing and Lamborghini, respectively. What a dominant season it's been. It's hard to find any fault, really, in what they've done, and it's fitting that they have it wrapped up so early, given how dominant they've been.
Yeah, it's incredible, Ryan. That duo picked up their 9th victory of the season, and it's out of 12 races held so far this season, which is just mind-boggling. I don't think we've seen this kind of dominance in any kind of era of World Challenge in recent history. Obviously, to their defense, there hasn't been a huge amount of competition in the pro class, but we still have seen some strong contenders throughout the year, namely with Windward Racing, which has won, Turner Motorsport, which has won. We had a TR3 Lamborghini racing in the pro class this week, which was fast as well. So it goes to show you that a good, well-oiled team can keep their momentum going and really prove to have the quality ingredients. And that's definitely what we saw over the weekend between Jordan Pepper and Andrea Caldarelli. I didn't see a single issue with the 3-car all weekend. I don't know about you, Ryan, but yeah, it was picture perfect from where I was sitting.
Yeah, same for me. Nothing that I was aware of. And, it's, like you said, remarkable. Even though they have run without a ton of competition, you still have the team car that you're going up against, and that car has only won once. In fact, there have been no repeat winners this season outside of Pepper and Caldarelli. Everyone else that has won, they've only won one race. And I think coming into the year, we knew it was going to be a tall task for Windward and for Turner, just because their driver lineups don't have the level of experience across the board that both of the K-Pax racing cars had. And that's where the surprise comes in. I thought it would be a bit more even between the two cars, and whether or not there was some deficiency with the 6 chassis. That's something we've heard a little bit from the team. Sometimes they acknowledge it. Other times they kind of backtrack on that. Or if it simply was domination from these two drivers. I'm really not sure what it is, but I have to say I don't believe that Pepper and Caldarelli are that much better than Venturini and Lewis. I really think on talent it's pretty close between those two lineups. So that leads me to believe there might be something amiss with the second car. Nevertheless, just the beatdown that it is within that team, I think, has become the story of the season as far as the pro class is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a mix, probably, in my opinion. I think it's a mix of maybe the 6 car not being as strong, whatever the issue could have been. I know it's been reported that there might be something with the steering in recent races. But when you pair Caldarelli, who's arguably probably the best Lamborghini factory driver out of the lineup, him or Mirko Bortolotti, I would probably rate as the two leaders of the pack. And then you put Jordan Pepper there, who's kind of been the newcomer to Lamborghini this year, obviously not a factory driver yet at least. I think he's been super strong with Bentley and with all of that he's done in GT3 up until now. I think that it sort of was the perfect ingredient with a very well dialed in car, two very quick drivers. And I think that's really what helped set this number 3 car ahead of the 6 or the other cars in the class. And quite arguably, you're looking at the Turner entry. It could be more or less a silver class entry if there was a silver class this year. And then the same could have been said for the Windward card at some races with Mikel Grenier filling in for Philip Ellis at some rounds. That could have very well been a silver class car too. So, I'm happy that SRO didn't make another category this year for GT World Challenge, because that would have made things even more confusing. But at the same time, I think it showed that there wasn't really a top frontline all pro entry to go up against this number 3 Lamborghini this year. And I think, again, no disrespect to the rest of the competition, but the 6 car was strong as well, and they were probably the closest competitor season long, but it just showed how good this driver pairing was, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was on display all season long, that's for sure. Pro-Am really was where the battles were this season, and it's amazing with all the diversity and winners that we've had. It's been like 12 or 13 different drivers that have won at least one race in that class. Nevertheless, that championship too is wrapped up, headed into the Indianapolis 8 hours, the first 3 hours of which pay points towards the GT World Challenge America Championship. And it's on the strength of consistency that Fred Pourdad and Jan Halen are already Pro-Am class champions. They never finished worse than 5th all year, only finished off the podium twice, had 3 wins. And that amazing consistency, John, is that coupled with the excellent performance from the Wright Motorsports team, that was more than enough to deliver a title with still 50 points left on offer, and they're too far gone for Taylor Hagler to catch.
Yeah, and I think this was another important one to lock up this past weekend, just because of all the unknowns going into the 8 hour, and this could potentially let Wright enter maybe a slightly different lineup or add a third driver that could be a factory driver or whatnot, because if they were having to run under the Pro-Am class designation at the Indy 8 hour, they would have had to put another bronze, I think, in the car. So now this gives them some more flexibility to maybe go for a silver class entry or an overall entry. Who knows? I don't know. But going back to their season, it certainly has been very consistent, and like you said, only off the podium twice. And race 2 over the weekend was probably one of their worst results of the year. I think the fourth place result there, but that came after a really impressive opening stint by Jan Halen again, who controlled the field during his time in the car, and it was really just a bad restart by Fred Pourdad, who was on cold tires, that I sort of saw him drop through the pack and ultimately still record the points that they needed to get the championship. And I think that sort of tells you how focused this team was on making sure they wrap up the championship. They weren't really too concerned about losing the win to Taylor Hagler and Dakota Dickerson in race 2.
And speaking of that pairing, that Racer's Edge duo, they won their second race of the season in race 2 of the weekend. And Taylor, I think her improvement throughout the season has been quite remarkable. She's become very, very strong and holds up her end of the bargain in the lineup, whether she's paired with Jacob Abel or Dakota Dickerson. But I thought, and not for the first time, Dakota Dickerson was the star of the show this weekend. Drives both in race 1 and race 2. Race 2 in particular, where there was contact not of his making that sent him effectively to the back of the grid right at the start of the first lap, and he drove all the way back through the field. Ultimately, they come home with the Pro-Am class lead. Taylor Hagler had to finish it off, of course, but Dakota's storming drive after the spin, I thought, was maybe one of the more remarkable things we saw all weekend.
Yeah, that was extremely impressive. He was clicking off times quicker than Halen out front. He was the quickest car on track, and mind you, with potentially some damage to the car, too, from that incident. So he's really impressed me in his time in GT cars. He's done some sports car racing in the past, LMP3 and whatnot. So he's definitely a star to look forward to in the future. But I think that this showed once again how well this HPD GT3 Academy program worked, with all of the graduates having won races this year.
That's right.
That took part in the races this year.
Yeah, and we'll see them all three driving together at the Indianapolis 8 hour. I think that'll be cool to see, and I believe a current GT3 Academy driver will be part of a different lineup as well in the 8 hours. So we'll get a bit of a preview perhaps of what next year might look like to some degree for graduates of that program. Really cool racing there in the Pro-Am class over the weekend. Plenty of good stuff. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, we've got plenty of coverage for you at sportscar365.com. Shifting away from from GT World Challenge America to GT America, powered by AWS. A really emotional story in a lot of respects. Mamo Gidley sweeping the weekend in the TKO Motorsports Bentley Continental GT3. Really neat to see for a number of reasons. Of course, coming back from the devastating crash at Daytona several years ago at this point, and getting his first professional race win, at least that I could find, going back to November of 2005 in a Grand Am race in Mexico.
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't realize it's been that long. It's he put on a really good show in both races. Came under attack from Jason Howard in race 2 until there was a yellow, but nonetheless, it seemed that he really had things hooked up in that Bentley that was run by Flying Lizard Motorsports. So great to see Memo return to victory lane, and hopefully he can keep up his winning ways as heading into the Indy season finale. Yep,
we expect to see him and that team racing at IMS. The GT4 portion of GT America was split between Sean Quinlan and Jason Bell. These were not points-paying races because this was a makeup for the CTMP round. GT America wasn't going to be there anyway because they were racing in Nashville, but they were given the chance to do exhibition races at Sebring if they wanted to. So that is indeed the case. Still, both championships up for grabs headed into the finale at IMS. Should also mention Pirelli GT4 America was racing at Sebring. Championships settled there across all three classes and early as well, with 2 races still to run. Nevertheless, Murillo Racing's Kenny Murillo and Christian Shimshak are your silver champions. NOLA Sport finally breaking through to win the championship in Pro-Am after a couple of close calls the last 2 years. Matt Travis and Jason Hart, the driving tandem there. And then the very impressive Smooge Racing duo, Kevin Conway and John Jesbray. They're the AM Class champions for 2021. Still 2 races to go in the season, John, but you look at the champions that come away from this, and there's great stories all throughout each of those 3 lineups.
Yeah, I would especially say the NOLA Sport duo, after coming so close the last couple of years, losing it in the final race in both years, to lock it up one weekend early was huge, I'm sure, for Jason Hart and Matt Travis. And mind you, they missed a race in the middle of the season too, due to a family wedding for Matt Travis's family. So to still lock up the championship with 2 races to go and getting 0 points in one of the races at Watkins Glen is a pretty incredible feat.
It is indeed. Full coverage again up at sportscar365.com. Also up on the website, it is, of course, the weekly racing roundup. You can find results from a number of series around the globe: DTM, ADAC GT Masters, Fanatec GT2 European Series, the Creventic 12-hour race at the Hungaroring, and French GT, Super GT, a whole lot more, plus some news from around the world of sports car racing up in the roundup. That's at the website now if you're so inclined. Some news to get to as we look ahead to the Indianapolis 8-hour in a couple of weeks. I know we've kind of teased it a few times here on the show, John. We're both pretty enthused about what we're expecting to see as far as car turnout and driver lineups for the second leg of the Intercontinental GT Challenge powered by Pirelli. And slowly but surely, some of these lineups are being released by teams and manufacturers. What have we learned here lately, and how excited are you about what we've seen so far and what still might be to come as far as these announcements go?
Well, we've had confirmations from all of the major manufacturers competing in Intercontinental GT Challenge, except Porsche so far. We're not quite sure where that's going to shake out for the race, but on Porsche's side. But I guess we could start with Audi. They've confirmed 4 cars total, 2 from WRT, 2 from Santalak. They're currently the championship leaders in IGTC competition, despite not winning the Total Energies 24 Hours of Spa. So they've really come out in force for the Indy 8-hour. They've basically used a lot of their factory drivers and whatnot for these entries. So that's great to see. We had the news Monday morning that Ferrari is committed to the remainder of Intercontinental GT Challenge. That was something we were expecting to happen after their big victory with Iron Lynx at Spa. News that the actual Total Energies 24 Hours of Spa winning lineup of Côme Ledegar, Nicholas Nielsen, and Alessandro Perguidi will continue on into the Indy 8-hour in an AF Corsa entered Ferrari. The three other drivers of factory caliber are in the second car, and that's great to see that AF will basically wave the flag, fly the flag for Ferrari in these final two intercontinental races. We also had confirmation from the two Mercedes AMG teams that'll be contesting under the performance team banners for the race. ACA ASP on Monday confirming that Raffaele Marciello and Felipe Frago will be part of their lineup. Then we also had the Team Craft Bamboo entry last week. I think that was confirmed. So lots of excitement there. And then also we've got some GT4 news with Random Vandals Racing, a Pirelli GT4 America competitor in the AM class. They've announced Connor Daly joining their lineup for the 8-hour in the GT4 class. So certainly there's been a flurry of news in the last couple days and weeks, and we can expect some more, I think, in the next couple of days in the build-up to the entry list being released on Friday.
Yeah, some surprises, I think, still to come as far as some kind of random one-off entries, both in GT3 and GT4. I'm excited about some of these GT4 lineups as well. They're not going to get quite the same amount of billing because they're not part of the full Intercontinental GT Challenge, but nevertheless, I think we'll see some good ones. And I would say this, I mean, we already know that Pippa Mann is slated to drive a GT4 car in the race, Connor Daly, and I don't think those will be the only two drivers with recent IndyCar experience. I've heard of one other that is likely to be a part of one of the GT4 lineups. So that's kind of cool, especially in Indianapolis. Hopefully that does something to invigorate some of the local race fans, and we have a good turnout for the race itself, which, again, I think is shaping up to be really good. I've had a peek at some of these entries that haven't been announced, plus the ones that have now, and I would say that any concerns of having a light grid or a grid lacking in star power should be assuaged when the full entry list is released later on this week. I believe Friday is the anticipated due date now for the official entry list, and you know, last year I thought the race was pretty good, John, even though we didn't have the numbers we were hoping for. I think there's every reason to believe this is going to be a success, at least in terms of what happens on the racetrack. What happens in the ticket office, I think, still remains to be seen, but I'm optimistic that what we have on the racetrack, at least, will be quite compelling.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure.
So we'll keep an eye on that as more information trickles out here in the days to come. From IMSA now, a story we had at Sports Car 365 on Monday. Chip Ganassi Racing, they've been in the rumor mill for a while about the potential to expand to 2 cars in the DPI class next year. Are we feeling like that's the direction things are moving at this stage, John?
Yeah, we believe it will happen as a 2-car effort in 2022. Again, no official confirmation yet, but we have multiple sources confirming that this will be the case. We know they've tested a number of drivers for these potential seats, including Sebastian Bourdais, Earl Bamber, Oliver Askew, and also Alex Lynn has been in the picture as well. So the only thing we know for sure is that Renger van der Zande will be back in one of the cars, I guess in the 01 car for 2022. We're just waiting to see what the rest of the lineup can look like. But things are looking pretty encouraging. I know there was a chance that the second car could debut as early as this year's Motul Petit Le Mans. It doesn't appear to be likely, at least as of now. But then again, things can always change in this very fast-paced world of sports car racing. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, it's good news that it looks like we'll have another car at least replace what will be the vacant Mazda seat, the entry in the field next year, so we can at least maintain the same number of DPI entries full season in the championship in 2022.
Do we have a sense for where the impetus for this expansion comes from? Is this Ganassi feeling like there's a benefit to having a second car? Is this Cadillac wanting to have a greater involvement, or some combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two, but I think a lot of it is being driven towards the future, and especially what we're going to be seeing in 2023 with the LMDH program. Chip Ganassi Racing obviously is going to have two different programs with Cadillac, both in IMSA and WEC. Signing somebody like Sebastian Bourdais would make a lot of sense for their WEC program, and having that knowledge of the European tracks and competing at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Earl Bamber as well could be a good candidate for those type of races too. So I think it's a lot about preparing for the future and making sure they have a strong driver lineup. And drivers are getting snatched up by all these manufacturers right now for the future. So it's good to get them involved in the program now. Don't have them sit a year out or potentially lose them to another manufacturer in the process.
Okay, interesting. We'll keep an eye on that as it develops as well. Some interesting news out of Detroit. For so long, the Belle Isle circuit has played host not just to sports cars, but IndyCar as well. It's been quite a motorsports festival since it was revived several years back now, but it sounds like, based on some minutes out of meetings in Detroit at the city council, that a proposal is in place for a true street course race through the streets of downtown Detroit, as opposed to on the park and on the island there at Belle Isle, looking ahead not to next year, but as soon as 2023. What kind of implications might there be for sports car racing with this move, and what do we know at this time about the likelihood that something like this might happen?
Well, what we know is that Penske Corporation President Bud Denker made a presentation during the city council meeting last Tuesday, proposing a 1.7-mile circuit that would be located near the original Detroit GP circuit that hosted both Formula One and IndyCar in the 80s to early 90s. It's very much a square layout with a lot of straightaways, and I think it would require quite a bit of work downtown in terms of resurfacing city streets and whatnot. Because I don't know about you, Ryan, but whenever I drive through downtown Detroit, it's a bit bumpy, and I don't think that these cars could handle those kind of bumps. Even I think they're a little worse than what Sebring can be even right now, but. Nonetheless, I think that this is the preferred move for the Detroit Grand Prix organizers, is to get a race into the city center. This would also alleviate a lot of the issues that have sort of stemmed from the Belle Isle protesters in recent years about having the race on the park island. There's been a lot of resistance in previous years from locals and residents that don't like the fact that all of the preparations and everything that go into that event on Belle Isle, takes away from their time, at the time that could be spent using the park as a park. And so I think this would sort of solve both issues, and looking at the success of other recent street races, particularly Nashville, and seeing the crowd that came for that event, I think that's another idea that sort of spurred on this concept here that's under study. So we'll have to see what happens. We do, as you said, we do know that next year it still will be run in Belle Isle, but for 23, it's still up in the air at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make, though, about the potential for a larger crowd. I think that is one of the limitations of Belle Isle. First of all, just trying to get people onto the island is a real hassle. That's true for fans, that's true for teams and media, everybody, really. It's not the easiest event from that point of view, and then just the space around the track is limited too. So I would have to say, even on the IndyCar side, that's probably one of the smallest crowds you'll see every year, and it's primarily just due to a lack of space. Not necessarily a lack of interest, and I hadn't considered that perhaps moving it to the streets might be able to help in that regard. I have to say, though, looking at the proposed circuit layout, it's pretty uninspiring. Like you said, it's a lot of straights and 90-degree corners. There's not a whole lot to it. I suppose there are benefits to it that might outweigh the lack of excitement that the track itself might generate, but I don't know. I guess that's the price that has to be paid sometimes, huh?
Yeah, and the other thing we have to think about is that will this event still remain on this part of the year, early June? It's going to become a real troublesome period of time come 23 when you have a lot of the IMSA teams, the LMDH teams, going over to Le Mans. So this falls on the Le Mans test day weekend, which would not work for LMDH cars to be eligible in this event. So would IMSA make this a GT only race, but then GTD Pro entries maybe won't be allowed, or would they bring in Michelin Pilot Challenge to the fray? Who knows? Or could the date be changed altogether, because it is Roger Penske who is the promoter of this event, and Roger has a financial vested interest in IMSA now with his soon to be relaunched IMSA program, which will be running the Porsche LMDH cars. So still a lot to be determined, I think, with this, what's going to happen, both A, in the location, and then B, what sports cars, if any, will be racing in 2023.
All right. To some listener questions now that have come in. The first one comes from Shay, who says, not much of a question, but more of a reflection on the GT World Challenge America race at Sebring. Probably one of the most ferocious drives I've seen all year in motorsport from Dickerson and Hagler. Painful to see how close we were to seeing, I think, the first potential female driver champion in GT World Challenge this year. On another note, let's hope that Turner and the M4 GT3 can challenge the K-Pax dominance next year. Also hoping that maybe Racer's Edge might add a pro car next year with Eversley and Dane Cameron wringing the neck of the NSX GT3. Don't think Dane's going to be in the frame for that. It sounds like he's likely to be employed elsewhere by another manufacturer, and maybe you could touch on that there. But to the general point, though, I think from some of the conversations I had over the weekend, there's a good chance for some additional growth in the series with more GT3 cars. I think it is exciting that the M4 GT3 is coming. Turner certainly intends to be there, and there very well could be a team or two from outside that's taking a look, that run the BMW, I guess, and will be the M4 next year, that are taking a look at it also. So, there's still a lot of things that need to be accomplished between now and then, but I am fairly confident that there will be a bit of growth in the series as far as car count goes, but not sure about Eversley and Cameron specifically. Unfortunately, I'd say that one seems rather unlikely.
Yeah, Dane's off to Porsche as part of the Penske LMDH effort. That hasn't been announced yet, but his time with HPD is probably coming to an end at the end of this year. But Ryan Eversley, as far as I'm aware, he's still very much part of that effort. And it'd be great to see an all-pro Acura back on the grid next year in World Challenge America.
I'll say this: it's a non-zero chance. There is a little bit of rumor going around that could be a possibility. So we'll see what happens. Next one comes from @Dr. Joey Bananas. Do we know, does Memo Gidley have any plans to show up as an endurance driver in the near future at Daytona or Sebring? It sure was fun seeing him ice the competition twice this weekend. Would love to see him on the big stage again. I've not heard anything about IMSA specifically, but I think there's a good chance he continues in SRO America next year, either in GT America or possibly in GT World Challenge America. I suppose both would be an option, but based on his pace, at least, which seems to be quite strong, and then his driver rating, in part because he's been out of it for so long, and then age starts to factor into things again, he might be someone who would be able to check all the right boxes for some teams for those enduros. Wouldn't that make some sense?
Yeah, it could. He is a bronze-rated driver, believe it or not. So that does have its benefits. Not as much in IMSA as it would be over in Europe with, the requirements there. But I guess if you do look at LMP2, where there's a bronze driver requirement there, if there is funding from an external source and, they need a quick shoe to hop in, I guess that would make the perfect option. I don't know if he's too keen in getting back behind the wheel of a prototype or not. But I guess there's certainly there's always possibilities in racing.
And there's no doubt that he's capable. Those performances this weekend were awfully impressive. Thanks for writing in, Dr. Joey Bananas. And finally, from A.T. Florio on Twitter, any chance of getting Colin Mullen and or Mekhi Stevens on the Double Stint podcast? He says, I know GT4 isn't high on the overall coverage list, but I do think these two are a major developing story. I think it's a good idea. We've kind of had to phase out some of the interview stuff just because travel has made it a bit more difficult here in recent years. I've ended up on the road a lot more than I was when we started this podcast. So when we get to the off season, though, that might be a good idea to bring some interviews back into the mix, and those two would be good ones to talk to. I don't know about you, but I too, John, have been impressed with what I've seen from them and the Conquest Racing team. Just 3 weekends into this program, and they're already double race winners now based on really solid results over the weekend at Sebring.
Yeah, I'd agree with you for sure. They were really impressive over the weekend, sweeping the races, and it really seemed that the strength, not only behind the wheel but on the pit box as well from that Conquest Racing West team has really put things in a good order.
Definitely so. Thanks for everybody for writing into the podcast here this week. We appreciate your interaction, and if others would like to do so, you can use the hashtag AskDoubleStint on Twitter or leave a comment in the comment section on this week's podcast up at sportscar365.com. We'll wrap things up here by looking ahead to the weekend to come. There is Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Endurance Cup Racing at Barcelona. DTM is racing at the Norris Ring. NLS is back in action, round 9 there on the Nordschleife coming up this weekend. But, John, you'll be out in Virginia at VIR for the next round of the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, another GT-only race. What are we expecting out of VIR?
Yeah, we have 18 entries. It's just GT Le Mans and GT Daytona, obviously, so much like the Lime Rock race back in July, but with some driver changes, some teams returning. We have Kevin Estra coming into the WeatherTech racing seat due to Matthew Jaminet and Matt Campbell, both on Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup duties in Barcelona. So it's another driver rotation through that car alongside Cooper McNeil. We have Allegra Motorsports slated to come back with Michael De Quesada and Daniel Mored at the wheel. Gilbert Kordoff Motorsports will be back with Guy Cosmo and Mike Skeen making his team debut. And then Mario Farnbacher is going to be filling in for the injured Mark Miller at Gradient Racing. This is partially due to Compass Racing not making a trip to Virginia for the weekend as they focus on their Indy 8-hour efforts. So 15 GT Daytona class entries overall, still a strong field there. I'm looking forward to covering all of the action this weekend for a Saturday race for WeatherTech Championship competitors. Michelin Pilot Challenge is on Sunday this year, I think, for the second consecutive year.
All right. Interesting. Looking forward to that this weekend. John will be on site, and we'll have all the coverage for you up on the website coming up this weekend. That'll do it for us this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, love to hear your questions and comments using the hashtag AskDoubleStint or in the comment section of the podcast. We'll address those and talk about everything that happened in the week to come when we speak with you next week on Double Stint.